we allow the physical part to mess up the spiritual part, which we can't see, but is absolutely just as real as the physical stuff we're seeing. But if we can't acknowledge that, then we're either pushing it away or it's not allowing us to be able to help us peel off those layers in a safe way.
Welcome to Get Unstuck and On Target, the weekly podcast that offers senior leaders insights and strategies to not only lead with confidence and vision, but also to achieve groundbreaking results. I'm your host, Mike O'Neill. I coach top-level executives on the power of ethical leadership to forge teams to be as united as they are effective. In each episode, join me for insightful conversations with leaders just like you, providing practical advice to help you get unstuck and propel you and your company forward. Let's get started. Most leaders work hard to succeed, but too often they tie their worth to what they do instead of who they are. As an executive coach, I've seen how easy it is for high achievers to look successful on the outside while quietly feeling out of sync, drained, and stuck. Today's guest, Gordon Melville, known as the long-bearded guy, is a breakthrough mentor who helps leaders reconnect with their true identity, not just their title. We dive into how real leadership transformation starts with owning your real value, not your KPIs, not your resume, not your latest win. Gordon shares a different way of thinking about leadership, showing how legacy isn't built someday, it's built daily, moment by moment, through who you be. If you ever wonder who you are beyond your role, or you felt disconnected from the deeper meaning behind your work, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. My guest today is Gordon Melville, breakthrough mentor, emotional intelligence expert, and a spiritual guide for high-impact leaders ready to transform not just how they show up, but who they are. He's known by his clients as the Vault Confidential. Gordon has helped men navigate affairs, addictions, breakdowns, and breakthroughs, all while holding the deepest trust that you can imagine. He's not just offering mindset shifts, he's guiding soul renovations. At the core of his work is one powerful idea. You are not what you do, you are who you be. Welcome, Gordon.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity, Mike.
You know, when someone sees the title of this episode, Who I Be, you might kind of go, Mike can't spell. But I love this expression. Tell me a little bit about how that may have come about.
You know what? It's an interesting thing because I think a lot of people don't understand who they really truly are. And so when I learned with some of my pro athletes, one in particular, an NFL gentleman that he retired while we were working together. And he reached out to me about 3 days later. He's like, Gordon, I don't know who I am. And I'm like, you're the same lovable goober you were 3 days ago. Like he said, well, I'm not an NFLer anymore. And I'm like, I understand, but that's not who you are. That's what you do. And so to separate those things out, we get so much of our identity, a lot of times, especially men, from what we do. And so if we're not working, we're not being productive, in which case we don't see any value in ourselves. And so to be able to separate that out and go, nope. And I ask it that way on purpose, who you be. I ask it that way because I'm trying to do a pattern interrupt. I want them to stop and think about it. Because if I say, who are you being? A lot of people it doesn't land the same way and they don't take it the right way. So when I say who you be, they stop and go, it makes them stop and actually think, what did he just ask me? And like I said, most people can't answer the question. And when they do try, they tell me what they do. And so I think that's a foundational piece of my work that underneath mindset, underneath process, underneath all these other things, even worth in value, I have to understand who I'm being before I move into anything else or the rest of it doesn't work.
Gordon, you work with high-performing leaders who probably look successful on paper, but I suspect on the inside, they're exhausted, misaligned. They may, in fact, be questioning who they really are. What are some signs that a high achiever might need to pick up on who they realize they're out of sync with their true worth?
Hmm. Great question. A lot of times, the people so the two avatars for me are, one's pro athletes, and the other one is, like I say, high performing elite man. And a lot of times, the former, the athletes is a different deal, but with the high performing men, a lot of times those guys are 45, 50 years old or more.
Mhm.
They look on the outside like, yep, everything's together. And, we were all taught, if I get a good education and I work really hard and I'm a good guy, that everything will be fine and I'll be happy. And what they're finding is they've got all the stuff. They have the house and the cars and the cottage and the boats, and from the outside, they look like they got it all together, everything's good. But something is they feel like something's missing inside. They're like, I did all the things, I've got all the stuff. I was told I would be happy and I'm not. And so now they're looking for significance instead of just stuff, right? They start to think of legacy. Pro athletes think about it their whole career. What's my legacy? What's my legacy? And I think they're more tuned into it than most men are, right? We think of legacy as an end of life thing, and it's not.
Hmm.
Legacy is something you think about it at any funeral you've ever been to. Do you hear anybody go, well, he had a great house and a great car and a beautiful wife and a big bank account and a boat? And we don't hear that at a funeral. What do we hear? Well, he did this with me, or he spent time here, or I remember this one time when we laugh about whatever that story is. What we're doing is pouring into legacy is what we've poured into people.
Hmm.
We do that every day without realizing we're doing it. Everything, this show today, this podcast today, I'm pouring into you, you're pouring into me, we're pouring into whoever the audience is. It is somebody that you see at the grocery store or the bank, or somebody in your travels, or somebody on the road. When we, we have a lot of roundabouts up here. I don't know if you have roundabouts down there, but if it's something that it looks like somebody, maybe you felt they cut you off, and we got all animated, and we're right. We'll probably never see them again. But if they could speak at our funeral, what would they say?
Hmm.
They're going to say, you know what? I think he thought I cut him off because that's what I've poured into them. A smile, something as benign as just smiling at somebody as you go by. We think of this, and I'll give you just a real quick story that I got from Reader's Digest years and years and years ago. We think of, I need to spend time or money or have influence somehow to be able to impact people's lives. We talk about dropping pebbles in the pond and watching the ripples that affects other people in their lives, that affects. And we have this misconception that takes time, or that I have to know the person, or right. So the story, and it's a true story, young man in New York City, and he was a loner, no family, no friends. He went to work. He walked home. He walked 10 blocks to work, 10 blocks home, and worked. And when he got home, he would have some supper and watch some TV and went back to bed, would do the same. He's like, my quality of life is there. I could disappear and nobody would ever know.
Hmm.
And so one morning he made a pact with himself. I'm going to walk the 10 blocks to work and home today. And if nobody smiles at me, I'm going to end myself when I come home. And New York City, people have been there. It's the first time I was there, I said to somebody, have a nice day. And they're like, don't tell me what kind of day to have. I'm just trying to be friendly. I'm just, but so I'm not sure that's a great place to have a pact like that with yourself. But as he tells the story, he walked to work 10 blocks. Nobody smiled at him. On the way home, one gentleman smiled at him. And like I say, in the grand scope, one smile, no big deal. On that day, it saved that young man's life. In the blink, I get goosebumps. In the blink of an eye, like there was no relation. He didn't know him. And the weird part is that gentleman that smiled at him could have gone home and gone, I'm not making an impact. He saved a life that day he'll never know. And so, no money, there was no relationship, no time, in the split second. And that wasn't, I realized after about the 1,000th time telling the story, he didn't drop, that smile was not a pebble dropped into that young man's life. It was a tsunami. It literally flipped his life over in the blink of an eye. He saved a life. And so we have that power to be able to do that with each other if we're paying attention. That's legacy. That's what we're leaving behind. That young man is alive because of that smile, what that other gentleman did for him, without even realizing he did it. And so, I think we can make that kind of an impact if we're paying attention and that awareness. And I talk a lot about awareness. You can't fix something until you're aware. Right. When I get triggered, I'm human, so there's a little bit of a visceral thing there, the reaction, but I catch that very quickly, and then I get excited, and my friends think I'm crazy. They go, "Why do you get all excited when you get triggered?" And I'm like, because a trigger is an unresolved trauma. So as soon as I get triggered, I'm like, "Oh, there's another one I can deal with," because if I'm not aware, I can't fix it. If you're an alcoholic standing in front of a group, until you can stand there and go, "Hi, I'm Gordon, I'm an alcoholic." That's awareness. Until you can do that, it doesn't matter what the programs are. It doesn't matter what you plug into. 12 steps are not going to work if you can't come to that awareness and ownership of what you've done or who you're being, well, for yourself even. That introspection, less than 3% of the population does any kind of personal development because it's hard. It's not easy. It's messy. It's painful. I might lose people around me. There's so many things that come into that. And so most people don't do it. Literally 97% of the population doesn't do any kind of personal development. And so, being able to connect with more people in terms of not just what I'm doing, but even making people aware, making guys aware. Hey, smile at people. Think of legacy as a daily thing. What are you pouring? I tell my 3 sons, I got 3 teenage sons. What legacy are you pouring into people today? Because that's what you're leaving behind you. Every day we do it.
Yeah, I've never heard legacy described that way. I've always heard it in the context of what do others say about you after you're gone. And what you're trying to do, if I understand this correctly, is try to stress to our viewers, to our listeners, that you're creating a legacy in real time.
Mm. Yep, absolutely. That's exactly right. Being able to look at, again, it's an awareness around how am I interacting with my world? That's what people remember. To your point, yes, that they remember how you interacted with them. Well, I can get in front of that and reverse engineer it, right? But one of the best exercises I do with clients, pro athletes, men, entrepreneurial men, businessmen, is to sit down and write their own eulogy. Not present tense, not if you died now. 40 years from now, when you're 85 or 90 or 95 or however long you want to live, what would somebody give a eulogy about who you are, who you be then? So what have you achieved in your life? What have you been able to, where you've gotten to? And I don't want to use the word become, because I don't think we can't become who we already are. Right. So if we think of it as growth, personal development, it's growth. It's not growth. It's peeling off the layers of crap. When they asked Michelangelo about David, how did you see that? He was already there. Michelangelo said he was already there. All I did was chip off the rough parts. And I think that's our life, is chipping off the rough parts. And then do we have the courage to do that? Because it's painful to peel that stuff off, all the crap off our life, to reveal who we truly be. And so, but that happens every day. And like I said, it's an awareness piece around, what am I leaving behind me? I can, like I said, reverse engineer it by being the person today that the eulogy, they're going to talk about what's happening today. Right. So it's the awareness around who I'm being, and that all ties together, right? Who I be, what my intrinsic worth and value is, that's all going to come out in that eulogy.
You've stressed that only 3% of the population even goes here.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned how you work with even a smaller percentage of those. But let's go back to this a little bit. And that's it. You've said you're not your role, you're not your title, you're not your KPIs.
Right.
So how do you help high performers? You mentioned the eulogy example, but how do you help them make this leap from their identity kind of wrapped around their doing to an identity more by being?
Again, another good question. I don't think it's a leap. I think that's part of the misnomer. Everybody thinks, oh, I've got to do this great, big, massive. It's not. A reframe around that is, again, I think it's just being aware. When I sit and talk to a guy and let them provide a safe. And I believe most men talk about, I don't want to tell, right? If I walk up to you and go, hey, Mike, tell me how you feel, let's discuss your emotions. You're going to go, get away from me, Gordon. I don't like, get away, because that's what we've been taught. And so being able to be aware of that and giving them a safe place, I find most men will open up to somebody that they trust, feel safe with, and are not judged. And so I share right at the beginning a lot of times with people that and I'm showing you that, but the semicolon, right? But I'm heart-centric, but that semicolon is the international sign for suicide survivor. And I share that at the beginning when I first start to share with guys, because they realize very quickly, okay, he's going to be transparent and vulnerable. He's going to just sort of put it out there, and it allows them, it's not permission. They don't need my permission, but they realize, okay, to hear somebody that's safe, he's not going to judge me. And I can just, that's where the vault, that name moniker came from, by somebody saying to me, I can just give you all my deepest, darkest stuff, and it just goes in and doesn't go anywhere. And so once to the short answer to your question is, I just provide an open space where they can open up. And that's the biggest, being able to talk about it, right? Giving them a place where they can exchange that idea and let those things out of them that they can't seem to let out or don't feel they're comfortable or safe to do anywhere else. They do that with me. And so in that process, as they do that, they realize I'm not, like you say, I'm not my KPIs. I'm not my bank account. I'm not my titles. I'm not what I have. I'm not my stuff. I'm not even what I do. Who I be at the base foundational piece. And I'm a spiritual human. You're a spiritual human. I can share with you, I believe all of us are, who we be is this very specific thing. And I think we're all exactly the same thing as far as who we be. It's not complicated. We, as humans, we want to complicate the crap out of everything. And it's not at all. I can share if you want, but I think we're all, who we be is exactly the same thing. And if we can understand, and that's why I say, when you let them talk, they talk themselves into, you ever done that where you have a question and you start to talk and you're saying it or sharing it with somebody else and you're like, I think I answered my own question. It's okay. I think I got the answer. What happened? An awareness by sharing, by letting it out of you, by talking it out loud. You heard what you were thinking and it allowed it to come out and you figured it out. And so I do that same kind of thing for guys.
Well, you mentioned spirituality, and I'd like to go there for a few minutes, and that is spiritual depth in a business world. You've talked pretty openly about your connection to Papa, and you bring spiritual language into kind of a business and leadership space, and that's often pretty rare. How do you see faith, meaning, and identity intersecting in the lives of leaders?
I think, and my dad and I talk about this a lot, and he asks, hey, how does your, and I separate religion and spirituality, because religion is man-made, our finite brain trying to understand an infinite, and we just keep screwing it up. So I'm not a fan of organized religion per se, but spiritual, anybody that's doing really high level personal development knows there's something out there bigger than them. However you want to identify that, whether it's Papa or God, or whether it's universal intelligence or source, or however you want to describe that being, we all understand. High developed people that are doing that kind of level of personal development understand intrinsically there's something out there bigger than themselves. And so, a fully well-rounded person has a spiritual piece to them, whether they acknowledge that or not. And I typically will use the illustration of Prince Harry, because Prince Harry abdicates the throne, wants nothing to do with his family. And he brings Meghan, they come to California, they do their thing. But is there anything Harry will ever be able to do that will ever change the fact that he was born to Prince Charles and Lady Diana? No. His birthright is royalty. Whether he acknowledges that, plugs into that, and lives out of that are all completely different issues. And so in our lives, I think exactly the same thing is true. Papa, who we be for me, and that's just my own personal thing, everybody is a child of a king. We're all Papa's kids. And I call him Papa because of my relationship with him, but we're all his kids, all of us. So you and I are male children of a king. That would make us princes. Our wives are princesses. At a base level, who I be is royalty. My birthright, your birthright, all of our birthright is royalty. Whether we acknowledge that, plug into that, and live out of that are all completely different issues. It doesn't change what is. I can say, gravity, oh, that's crap. But if I step off the roof, it's going to affect me whether I believe in it or not. And this works exactly the same way for me. We all have this spiritual peace, this connection. We're built with a connection. Papa just isn't, love is not an attribute of Papa. For me, and I believe he is love. So anywhere I see it, love, he's there already. So if I can't acknowledge that there's somebody out there bigger than me, there's a power out there bigger than me, I'm limiting my ability to be able to grow. If you're familiar with quantum and fourth dimension and some of those types of ideas, that the stuff is already there. People, oh, Gord, that manifesting stuff. I got a buddy that used to tell me, Gord, it's crap. And I'm like, okay, why do you say that? And he said, well, I get his bad stuff. And I'm like, great. So we had this little conversation. I'm like, are you a negative person mostly or a positive person mostly? And as we talked through it, he goes, I think I'm probably a negative person mostly. I'm like, right, do you approach things from a good place or a bad place, from a lack or an abundance? And we talked about that. I think lack. And I'm like, great. So what's showing up in your life? Lack and negative. I said, then manifestation's working exactly the way it's supposed to. You're just not manifesting what you want because that's not what you're putting out. I have 5 sentences of empowerment. And the third one is, which I talked to my sons. It was something I did with my middle son years ago. He was in grade 5. But that middle sentence is, I'm a magnet. What I put out is what I get back. That's a biblical concept, right? And so if we're focused there as part of who we are, and I don't think it matters whether it's business, that spiritual peace is always there. And I'll ask clients, are you a human having a spiritual experience or a spirit having a human experience? And the one I'm thinking about, he hummed and hawed a little bit and he goes, you know what, I think I'm a spirit having a human experience. And I'm like, that's exactly what's happening. The problem is a lot of times we allow the human experience, because we can see it and touch it and feel it in our 5 senses can see it and experience it. We allow the physical part to mess up the spiritual part, which we can't see, but is absolutely just as real as the physical stuff we're seeing. But if we can't acknowledge that, then we're either pushing it away or it's not allowing us to be able to help us peel off those layers in a safe way. Right?
Gordon, with the core theme of getting unstuck, can you share a moment where maybe someone came to you and they were stuck? They might be wrestling with identity. It could be shame. It could be burnout. But whatever it was, something clicked in working with this person that changed everything. Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. There's lots of examples of that. And you know what? I think we've already kind of touched on it. Once people get into a space where they know they're safe and not judged and can share, that a lot of times that's what flips that switch. Because there's so many people that don't even realize they have a choice. When I say to somebody, you will not hear me say, I did tell in a story, I said, hey, when I was in New York, have a nice day. I used to say that to people, but have a nice day is kind of a make the best of whatever happens. And so I say to people, I've always said to people since then, make it another great day. And then recently in the last probably 90 days or so, I'm a big choice guy. We are where we are because of decisions and choices we've made. That's just the reality. We can like that or not like it, doesn't matter. And if people look at me and go, Gord, your body is letting you down, right? You're pained and you're sick and your body's letting you down. I'm like, no, I let it down. I ignored it for 30 years. This is the consequence of the decisions and choices I made to ignore it. I'm reaping that now. And so if I can understand and take ownership of my choices, then I'm taking literally a great book by Jocko Willink is Extreme Ownership. For that very reason, I'm taking 100% ownership of where I am. And so if I can get a guy to plug into that and take ownership of where they are right now, it's not because of an ex, it's not because of a previous boss or a boss, or it's not because of parents or a life. None of that matters. Taking ownership of everything, going, no. You know what? I am where I am because of the choices I made. I chose to work in that place. I chose to be in that relationship. I'm 50% responsible. People go, yeah, but I have responsibilities. I've got bills. I have to have a job. Great. I'm not saying quit before you have something else. I'm saying find something you prefer to do. You have control of that. You don't like your job? Jim Rohn used to say, if you don't like where you are, move. You're not a tree. You can move. But I think when a lot of people go, I don't have any choice. I'm like, you always have a choice. The challenge is we don't like the options we see. That's the problem. Or we're afraid of the devil we don't know, so we stay with the devil we know. And then we bitch and whine and complain because our life isn't what we want it to be. And I'm the type of human that, I'll call a spade a shovel, right? I may punch you in the throat, but I'll put a phone book on you first before I hit you with the bat so that there's no mark. I talk about leading with love, but I also talk that sometimes that's tough love. Because a lot of times our ego wants to protect ourselves. And so I don't need that, or that. If we actually stop and think about it for a little bit and we're really honest with ourselves. I remember this one athlete said to me years ago, he's like, Gord, he got stuck with another mentor, with a coach. And I'm like, okay. He said, I said, why did you stop working with him? And he goes, because I think I outgrew him. And I said, what made you think that? And he said, well, he kept giving me the same exercise over and over and over and over and over and over and over. We didn't move past that. And I thought for a minute, I was like, okay, so is that because he didn't know anything else to give you, or because you didn't do the exercise right? And there was a big long pause, and he was humming and we're looking at each other on the screen like you and I are. And he's like, oh yeah, you know what? I guess if I'm honest with myself, I didn't like the exercise, so I half-assed it and didn't do it the way I probably should have. So he wasn't willing to move past it until I actually, because it's all building. All of this stuff is building on, right? I expand and then I grow on that, and then I expand and then and it's not. And I talk expansion. What I'm saying is, once your mind is expanded, it can't go back. So once you hear the information, it can't go back. You can't forget. So it's always going to be there. And so the coach wouldn't go past it. And so I tell people, I'll lead with love. It might be tough love. And that's where somebody that you and I know real well said to a guy that she had just met, you need to talk to Gord. And one of my mentors. And he said, why? And she said, because the conversations, those real deep ones that you can't share with anybody else. And that's to your question, that's where usually we get stuck. I can't move past this. And so we bury it and we don't deal with it. She goes, Gord's the guy you have those conversations with that you don't think you can have with anybody else. He provides that vault, that safe place where you can trust that there's no judgment. You can just share. And a lot of times, like I say, once we get it out, boom, away it goes. And we get unstuck. We're holding ourselves back. I talk a lot about being in a cage that we made for ourselves. It's a cage we built, and we're sitting in it with the door open and the key in our hand. We can leave it whenever we want. But we find for a lot of time, we sit in that cage long enough. Well, it's protecting me from what, I need. It's limiting me. I'm in a cage. I can't get out. I can't be who I want to be. I'm being restricted. Right? But we're sitting with the door open and the key. What happens over time, though, if I sit there long enough, decades and decades and decades, eventually I close the door and throw the key out where I can't reach it anymore. And now it's protection against everything outside. And now it's the whole frog in the pot story, right? Now I can't leave because I've immobilized myself. Fear, anxiety has stopped me from being courageous and stepping into who I'm supposed to be, stepping into my empowerment. Again, if I go back to I can't become who I already am. We're already children of a king. We're already royalty. So peeling off the layers of crap, the human stuff, to be able to see and be who I'm supposed to show to the world, right? There's two kind of components there. One is, can I do that, be courageous enough to do that for myself? But then can I also stand in that spot and be courageously showing who I really truly am to everybody else in the world, right? We all want to be unique. Oh, I got to be unique. Be you. That's unique. Nobody else can do that. But we have these Superman moments when we put our hands on our hips and go, I'm going to be unabashedly, unapologetically me. And if they like it, great. And if they don't like it, I don't care. And then somebody we love or trust questions that. And instead of standing in that empowerment and going, no, I'm going to be me, we turtle and we put our mask back. Oh, they're not going to love me unless I'm this other person. And we wonder why we're messed up. We don't know who we're being. We don't know our intrinsic worth and value. And then we're acting a part that isn't really who we truly am, right? Not who we really are. And then we wonder why situations confuse us. Well, this is how I would know. This is how I would respond to that or act to that situation. But that's not how my character would act to that situation. And then I get confused. Now I get stuck. Put the stuff down. Take the mask off. Oh, they won't love me. Then they didn't love you anyway. I said to my wife last year, I prefer to be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not. Right to the core of, if they hate who I be, no problem. One of the athletes on the team I work with, he said, well, maybe people don't connect because of the appearance. And I'm like, well, I chewed on it a lot. And then I came back to him. I'm like, you know what? Everybody didn't like Jesus either. Didn't like the look, didn't like the message, didn't like whatever it was, right? So I'm in good company. And I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm okay with that. And I think that's where the linchpin for a lot of us is. We can't be okay with that, right? Can I stand alone when everybody else is flying in my face? Can I be a salmon swimming upstream when everybody else is going, no, take the easy way? I laugh to put some levity to it. I find it very interesting that there's a stairway to heaven, but a highway to hell. I think that's very interesting, right? Very small people going up, lots of people going in the other direction. And so, people have said to me over the years, find out what everybody else is doing and then go the complete opposite direction, because following the masses is a problem, because sometimes the M is silent. So it's a matter of being able to say, no, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing and stand in my own empowerment. That's what I was designed with. That's what we're all designed to do, right? So, yeah, a lot of times we're the stick. The unstuck, all I have to do is let myself out, let myself go. I'm the only problem. That's my first sentence of empowerment. I am the only problem I will ever have, and I am the solution. It's 100% ownership, right? There isn't another problem. If I have a plan to move forward, nobody's got a plan to stop me. There just isn't. Then we don't stick to that plan.
So, Gordon, that's a wonderful point to kind of transition as we start to kind of wrap up this conversation. If someone's listening right now or watching and they're nodding along, but they feel disconnected from their own worth, what might be one small step they can take this week to begin coming back to who they are?
Again, another great question. There's two things that I talk a lot about, or that I propose as real easy, simple things. We can go way deeper. We don't have time for that. Real quick, easy stuff. Find a nature place. Find a conservation area or a big open field, or drive out into country someplace. Take your shoes off and just walk on the ground. Walk on the dirt. It sounds ridiculous, but it absolutely grounding. And a lot of times, if you just stand in a space or sit in a space where there's nature, it'll suck a lot of that out of you. Like instantly, you'll feel better immediately just sitting. And it's because you're connecting to Papa, you're connecting to Source in that space. That's one way. The other way is to write stuff down. I journal in 5 different journals every day. And so I call it retching, right? When I'm angry or frustrated or whatnot, Instead of calling a buddy, if I called you and said, "Hey, I'm struggling and I'm frustrated. Can we talk? Do you have a minute to talk?" Even if you're having a crappy day, you're going to say yes to me because you want to be of service. And so we get together, I call, we talk, and basically I pee into your brain. I just unload all this crap. If you're not trained to be able to not let that affect you, you're now standing there with all the crap you had before the call, and now you've got all my crap, and you're like, oh, it just makes it even worse. So a tool to be able to let that out is I call it retching. And if I go to my journal and I sit down and I just start to let it out, if I'm what we call it, I need to vent, right? But if I'm venting with you, I may not use all of the names because you might know some of those people. And I probably will not use language that's colorful because I don't want you to look at me different. So I'm sanitizing. So I'm not really venting the way I should be anyway. So it's not really effective for me either. So to write it down, I can be as offside, all the right names, I can use whatever language I want. No one's ever going to read it. It's mine. It's the weirdest thing. Once I do that and get it out of so it gets off that hamster wheel. We just let that hamster wheel run and run and run and run and run. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's part of the problem. Once I sit down and write it out, I get it out of me in a way that hasn't affected anybody else. All of a sudden I feel better, right? It allows that flow. It takes away the dam and allows the flow to come back. Even better, go to nature somewhere and take a journal with you and sit and right next to a waterfall or next to a pond or right and journal and just write it out exactly what you're feeling. Just write what you're thinking, what you're feeling. It just like that, it'll change.
Great suggestions. As we kind of wrap up, I want to invite our listeners to kind of reflect on this. If today's conversation stirred something in you, just don't brush it aside. Take a quiet moment this week. Get outside, just you and the journal, and ask, who am I? Without the title, the output, or the hustle. That might be the most important question you ask this year. And every conversation I have with leaders who are wrestling with growth and identity, the truth is always, this is what rises to the surface. Real leadership begins when you remember your worth beyond what you do. Gordon, thank you so much for showing up with such presence and depth today. Before we close, where can people connect with you or learn more about the transformational work that you do?
There's two. They can just send me an email. Is the vault confidential at gmail.com. Send me an email as direct, or you can jump on YouTube if you pump in the long bearded guy. And I know that's a little bit out of left field, but there's 100 episodes of my podcast. But you can sit and listen to similar type stuff. Find a topic that you resonate with, and then be open to allow that. Right? Stop yourself from putting it into a box and going, no, right? Don't write when you're writing that stuff. You're not writing, this is what I do. It doesn't matter what you do, right? All those things are soft things. Which a lot of times we don't give ourselves credit for, but being able to do that. And so that's the easiest way is either email me directly or jump on, put the long bearded guy in any social media platform. You'll find me.
I'm going to encourage people who typically listen to watch this episode. You'll know why that's his email address, the long bearded guy. Gordon, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone who's tuning in, be it watching or listening, I hope this episode with Gordon has helped you get unstuck and on target. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Get Unstuck and On Target. I hope you've gained insights to help you lead with confidence and drive your organization forward. Remember, at Bench Builders, we're committed to your success, your leadership excellence, and your strategic growth. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, please leave a review, rate, and subscribe to keep up with our latest episodes. This show really grows when listeners like you share it with others. Who do you know who needs to hear what we talked about today? Until next time, I encourage you to stay focused on the target and continue to break new ground on your leadership path.
This show is powered by Media Leads. To get your next great podcast produced, go to MediaLeadsCo.com.